Thank you, boys. That was an auspicious beginning. And it is now my pleasure to invite our revered principal, Swami Ekachittanandaji Maharaj, to deliver formal words of welcome.
Om Namo Bhagavate Ramakrishna. Respected Professor Kousik Basu, revered Swami Shastraganandaji Maharaj, respected Vijayaditya Da, respected Partha Da, other distinguished members of the faculty, esteemed colleagues, members of the faculty members of the Vidyalaya, and alumni of this college, and my beloved students. My respectful namaskar, good wishes, and respect to all. So, while writing down reminiscences on Swamiji, Betty Leggett wrote down these lines that I have seen two types of majesty, greatness of two kinds. I have come across a German Kaiser as well as Swami Vivekananda. So the first type that is represented by Kaiser, to him also I went and I felt cowed down. I felt I am very, very insignificant. I have nothing to say and I feel dwarfed. And when I come to Swami Vivekananda, his greatness elevates me in all dimensions. So I'm very happy that today you have got one personality, magnetic personality, Professor Kousik Basu, who was the former Chief Economic Advisor to the Prime Minister of India, and now who is the faculty member of the Department of Economics, Cornell University, USA. He has kindly agreed to be with us and deliver an address to our beloved students. So, the beauty is that he has got his formal introduction will be given by Partha later in greater detail. But to us, the members of the residential college family, is verily a member of the family, so to say. Since last 3 months or so, I've been striving hard to get in touch with him, bring him here, so that he can share his words of enlightenment with our dear students. February this year, he came to Gold Park, and we are much indebted to Shaktida, Professor Shakti Prasad Misro, who was very much instrumental in conveying the message from the college to Professor Basu immediately. And as soon as he heard that an invitation has come from Narendrapur, he readily agreed. He was very much eager to come on that occasion itself, but due to his busy schedule, he could not make it out. But this time, we're very, very fortunate that he is in our midst. And on behalf of the college family, on behalf of IQAC, I extend a most hearty welcome to Professor Kousik Basu. Namaskar.
Thank you, Maharaj. It is now time to formally felicitate our guest of honor today. And may I request our revered Vice Principal Maharaj, Brahmachari Kedaro Chaitanya, and Coordinator of the Internal Quality Assurance Cell of the College, Dr. Rothindranath Ghosh, to come up on the stage and felicitate Professor Kousik Basu. May we join our hands. Dr. Rothindranath Ghosh of Department of Chemistry, Coordinator IQAC, felicitating Professor Basu. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you, Rothin. It is now my pleasant duty to request Srimad Swami Shastravdanandaji Maharaj, our revered secretary of the ashrama, to deliver his speech.
পার্থদা একেবারে ঠিক বলেছেন। আমি অনুষ্ঠান সূচিটা দেখে আমি খুব বিপন্ন বোধ করছিলাম, বিকজ এই অনুষ্ঠান সূচিতে লেখা আছে ইন্ট্রোডাক্টরি ওয়ার্ডস, মানে বিষয়টা হিস্ট্রি অফ ইন্ডিয়ান ইকোনমি, স্পিকার প্রফেসর কৌশিক বসু, আর আমি যদি তার উপর ইন্ট্রোডাক্টরি ওয়ার্ডস দিই, এর চেয়ে আমার পক্ষে আর বিড়ম্বনা কিছুই হতে পারে না। সে একেবারে ঠিকই বলেছেন। আমার দু একটি সামান্য কথা আমার মনে হয় যারা আজকে আছেন, many of you may have heard, especially seniors, you have heard this speech, the lecture of Professor Kousik Basu. I remember when we were organizing our Diamond Jubilee celebration of this college, that time COVID situation was there, so we requested Professor Basu to deliver a speech online, and we recorded that. So during the in that speech, really it was a mesmerizing experience to listen to me directly, because only myself was there while recording. Online he was just delivering the talk. আমার মনে হয় আজকেও সেরকমই একটা হবে। আমি তো, as I have told, I don't belong to the discipline of economics. আমি লিটারেচারের স্টুডেন্ট, কিন্তু when I was in Vidya Mandir College, that time I was vice principal, he came to deliver a talk on game theory. আমি মানে শুনছিলাম হলের সাইডে দাঁড়িয়ে, আমার ক্লাস শেষ হয়েছে, পরে একটা ক্লাসে যাব, আমার সঙ্গে ছাত্ররাও আছে, সাইডে দরজার সাইডে দাঁড়িয়ে শুনছিলাম। তা আমাদের পরপর দুটো ক্লাস উনি নষ্ট করে দিতে পেরেছিলেন। আমরা ওই দাঁড়িয়েই ছিলাম দরজার পাশে, অ্যান্ড পেশেন্টলি উই লিসন, নট অনলি পেশেন্টলি, উই আর সিম্পলি মুভ ওভারওয়েলড। আমরা বিষয়টা জানতাম না, কিন্তু যে এত সুন্দরভাবে, এত লুসিড ওয়েতে, ইন ভেরি সিম্পল টার্মস হি went on explaining the things with some unique anecdotes. I still recall that speech. এবং তারপর যখন আবার এই আমাদের ডায়মন্ড জুবিলিতে বললেন, সেখানেও স্পেশালি আই রিমেম্বার how he differentiated between two powers, soft power and hard power, and gave the example of South Korea, that how this South Korea developed itself through the cultivation of soft power. That was really a very good speech, still I remember. So I will not go on delaying the event. It is always better to listen from the right person at the right point of time. আমার ব্যক্তিগত তরফে আমি ওনাকে আমার আন্তরিক ধন্যবাদ, নমস্কার, কৃতজ্ঞতা জানাই। এবং আমার বিশ্বাস যে আজকে তোমরা যারা রয়েছো, আপনারাও যারা রয়েছেন, বিশেষত ছাত্ররা, it will be a really excellent experience for you. Thank you. নমস্কার।
মহারাজকে আমরা নমস্কার, কৃতজ্ঞতা জানাই। So now before I request Professor Basu, it is my pleasant duty to give a brief introduction. Actually, I will read it out. This has been prepared by one of his direct students who happens to be amongst us in the left extreme, Vijayaditya Chakraborty of our Department of Economics, who was a direct student of Professor Basu during his Delhi School of Economics days. So Professor Kousik Basu is a Professor of Economics and Karl Marx Professor of International Studies at Cornell University. With a career that spans decades and continents, he has established himself as a paragon of intellectual rigor and a beacon of insightful economic analysis. He served as President of International Economic Association from 2017 to 2021. He was formerly Senior Vice President and Chief Economist of the World Bank during 2012 to 16, and prior to that, Chief Economic Advisor of Indian government during 2009 to 2012. Professor Basu received his PhD and MSc in Economics from London School of Economics and BA Honours from St. Stephen's College, Delhi. He has published widely in the areas of development economics, industrial organization, game theory, welfare economics, and law and economics. Professor Basu's work is characterized by its depth and breadth, addressing complex issues from development economics to game theory. His pioneering research has shed light on the intricate mechanisms of markets and the nuanced interplay between policy and economic outcomes. His contributions to the theory of industrial organization, welfare economics, and the economics of globalization have offered fresh perspectives and innovative solutions to long-standing economic dilemmas. Basu was a professor at the Delhi School of Economics, where in 1992 he founded the Center for Development Economics and served as its first executive director. He is also a founding member of the Madras School of Economics. Professor Basu has authored several textbooks that have become cornerstones in the study of economics. He is also the author of An Economist in the Real World and The Republic of Beliefs, among other books. His textbooks are widely used in universities around the world. These textbooks are more than just academic resources. They are influential works that continue to shape the understanding and practice of economics. In May 2008, he was awarded the Padma Bhushan, one of the India's highest civilian awards. He was held visiting positions at the Institute of Advanced Study, Princeton, London School of Economics, Harvard University, Princeton University, and MIT. Beyond academia, Professor Basu has been a transformative figure in the realm of policy making. As the chief economist of World Bank, from 2012 to 2016, he brought his analytical acumen to the global stage, influencing economic policies that have had far-reaching impacts on developing nations. His tenure as the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India saw him playing a pivotal role in shaping economic policy during a critical period of the nation's development. Professor Kousik Basu's profound insights, impactful research, and dedicated service continue to shape the field of economics, leaving an indelible mark on both academia and policy making. In the grand tapestry of economic thought, Professor Basu's contributions shine brightly, illuminating paths to understanding and addressing some of the most pressing economic challenges of our time. And with this, it brings to my mind a sloka from the Upanishad, wherein we find Hiranmayena patrena shatta shapi hitang kham tattang pushannapa brinu shatta dharmaya drishtaye. সুবর্ণমণ্ডিত পাত্রে সত্য মুখ লুকিয়ে রয়েছে, হে পুষণ, হে জ্ঞানী, অপাবৃণু উন্মোচন করো সত্য ধর্মায় দৃষ্টায়, so that we may know the truth. And with that, and with a big round of applause, please, let us invite Professor Basu to deliver his lecture entitled History of Indian Economy, 1947 to 2024. Professor Basu.
স্বামী একচিত্তানন্দজি, স্বামী শাস্ত্রজ্ঞানানন্দজি, ডক্টর চক্রবর্তী, ডক্টর মুখোপাধ্যায়, শ্রী মুখোপাধ্যায়, হয়তো ডক্টর শ্রী গুলোচ্ছি, কিন্তু অনেক ধন্যবাদ. Great thanks, and for the very generous introduction. I know there are many monks here, there are teachers and students. To all of you, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Actually, I have to say, for me, the Ramakrishna mission has a very, very special place in my heart. I am a skeptic. I like to question everything. But this is one of those orders coming from Swami Vivekananda that encourages exactly that. So it strikes a chord, very special one in me, Swami Vivekananda's life, his idealism, his inclusiveness, the broadness has a special ring with me. So for me, the invitation is very special, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here on this occasion talking to you. I went back and forth with Swami Ekachittanandaji about what topic I will speak on, and finally decided that given today's juncture in India, the global economy, it may be worthwhile to take stock of where we stand, bit of the past, and the current challenges about where we are headed. Before I get into India and a short history, it will be a very short history of the Indian economy, let me just give you a preamble about economics itself. You know, economics is a very strange subject. It's a mixture of some parts of it are really intuition, common sense, looking at numbers, but then using your judgment. Any intelligent human being, a politician, a bureaucrat, can develop an understanding of those parts. There are parts of economics, however, which are founded in mathematics, like engineering, very specific. And I hope during the talk, in the context of India, I will give some examples of that, which have to be done in very, very specialized way, taking advantage of certain techniques, formal techniques of analysis. This leads to a very special problem. When you're building an aircraft, politicians will not come, senior bureaucrats will not come and say that, look, leave it to us. It's all common sense how you build an aircraft. Make the wing a bit lower, raise the tail of the plane a little bit. No one says that because you know you'll mess up with the plane, it will crash. With economics, it's very easy for people who have nothing to do with the discipline, politicians, bureaucrats, to come in and say, we will do it all. And the truth is, economists need to be humble that there are parts of economics which are like that, which is judgment, common sense, etc. But there are parts which are very different. To back up, the birth of economics is usually taken to be 1776. But like with all disciplines, history goes further and further back. There were early thinkers, but 1776 stands out for us because of the mammoth work of Adam Smith. Again, I like good human beings. Adam Smith was an amazing person. Lived a very, very simple life. On his own, producing completely absent-minded professor. And in 1776, he comes out with this mammoth work, The Wealth of Nations. And the core idea, it's a massive book, and we must remember that Adam Smith's earlier work was in moral philosophy. And it's a repeated reminder that economics cannot be detached from moral philosophy. But the core of The Wealth of Nations, which caught people's attention, was, if you look around the world, the marketplace. Someone is bringing goods to the market. Someone is making those goods in little homes. Someone is coming and buying those goods. To an outsider, it will appear, is someone ordering these people? Produce the shirts that have to be sold. Produce the food that has to be bought by people for survival. There must be someone giving out these orders. But Adam Smith said no. It's happening because each individual, thinking of himself or herself, one's own interest, is doing little bits of work. Together you get this order. He called this the invisible hand. This was a broad work. Adam Smith's work is purely in words, descriptive work. Trying to give it shape and structure took almost 100 years. Actually, it took 98 years because in 1874, Adam Smith is 1776, in 1874, Leon Walras gives a mathematical description of this diverse world. Different people with their own motivations trying to do things. How does it all come together? You get something called the general equilibrium. And here's the fascination of the subject, that it took 100 years to give a mathematical structure. Another 70, 80 years, there was one open problem in economics. We understand the general equilibrium, but we can't prove whether a general equilibrium will exist or not. The existence of a general equilibrium, for that you needed a mathematician. And in economics, there was a very strange and unusual mathematician, John Nash, who, as we know, tragically lost himself to schizophrenia by the age of 29. So all his powerful works were done before that. John Nash realized that you needed a theorem from mathematics, proved by a Japanese mathematician, Kakutan, to prove the existence of equilibrium in games, and then there were others who give it formal structure. It becomes a mathematical discipline. But the intuition is throughout important. With that background in mind, let me jump into India. India's economy, I'm going to 1947, as was said. From 1947 onwards, I will look at. The first years, 20, 30 years, are very difficult years. These are years of trial, trying to understand the economy, trying to put in policies. And what better can you do than look for ideas around the world, the best ideas, and you try to bring them in. One area where India was absolutely a pioneer for a developing country to take those kinds of steps as happened in 1949, is the use of statistics to understand the country. And some of you will know whose work I'm referring to, Prashant Mahalanobis, the National Sample Survey. It was understood that to handle an economy like this, you can't just sit in your room and spout theories. You need to understand how people are living. Is there a shortage of food? How much are they getting? How much is people's income across the country? Not just a few rich people, but how are they doing across the country? You need to understand that. To go and collect data from everyone, like in a census, will take you very long time, and you can't do it every year. So what do? Prashant Mahalanobis came up with the idea that you do a random sample. You don't study the full country, but you take a random sample, and in fact the original study in 1949 was with 100,000 individuals. 100,000 individuals would be interviewed. But here what you have to be careful, it can't be just any 100,000 individuals to get an idea about the full country. If you go to the marketplace and look at people standing around and survey 100,000 people, you'll immediately miss out on people who are too unwell to be there standing and doing things in the marketplace. So you need to draw a random sample from the full country. So this method was started. Nehru was a great champion of that, and statistical method for data collection, where India is an absolute global pioneer. The biggest techniques statistically founded started out. The next big move were the 5-year plans. The first 5-year plan was a small amateurish one. The second one, when 1956, Nehru by then was a great admirer of Mahalanobis and his capabilities, and Mahalanobis had produced a model, a mathematical model, based on a Russian mathematician come economist, the Feldman model. Nehru was quite taken in by the Russia's big planning, and since Mahalanobis had worked on that, he was brought into the second 5-year plan. The second 5-year plan is basically again crafted by Prashant Mahalanobis, and India starts this big industry, centrally planned, which was supposed to be the start of India's planning and India's growth. I don't want to get into the details of that. The original growth story of India was not inspiring. India's growth after 1940, independence was good for India. There's no doubt about that. There is a lot of data which shows that before independence, India, for about 50 years, up to 1947, India used to grow roughly at 1% per annum. Population was growing a little bit faster than that. So per capita income was actually going down slowly, not sharply but slowly. From 1947, India's growth rate, basically from 1951-52, India's growth rate picked up. It was roughly 3.5% per annum. 3.5% per annum remained India's growth rate for quite some time. So people were beginning to get agitated that probably there were policy mistakes, and indeed there were policy mistakes. The most important thing to realize when you make policy is no matter how intelligent you are, how seriously committed you are, mistakes will happen. Economics again is one of those partially scientific disciplines with partial intuition. So when you use intuition and common sense, mistakes will happen. India was drawing on the ideas of the world at that time. Big planning, big industries being set up by the government, and somehow it was not moving the economy. The growth rate picked up, 3.5% is not bad, but it remained stuck over there for quite some time. There were others who were beginning to come in. Sukumar Chakraborty, there was Ramakrishna. In fact, Ramakrishna coined it. Today's world is so political. Ramakrishna coined the term jokingly. Ramakrishna was a marvelous economist from Jaipur and was at the Delhi School of Economics advisor. No matter what you do, India's growth rate was remaining around 3.5%. So Ramakrishna jokingly wrote in a paper which became very famous, saying that this must be the Hindu rate of growth. It must be written in the scriptures somewhere that this land will never grow by more than 3.5%. It was a good-hearted joke, and we used to laugh about it. Ramakrishna would sit and laugh about it. And of course, he knew that with the right policies, that would change, and that would change. Indeed, India's growth rate picked up from 3.5% after remaining stuck over there. It picked up. And from the early 1980s, India was growing faster. But let me back up a little bit. India's first year of remarkable growth was 1975-76. And if you again foolishly do correlation with big incidents taking place, you will make a big mistake. 1975 is a dramatic year in India's political economy. Indira Gandhi declares an emergency and takes over completely authoritarian, dictatorial control of running India's economy. It's a complicated political story as to why she did it. Time is short, so I will not go into that. But emergency was declared in June 1975. Dramatic moment from India, and in fact, 75 to 76, India's growth rate shoots up to 9.5%. Nothing like this had been seen before. There was years of occasional spikes, but this seems to be India's takeoff. There were people who were beginning to argue that dictatorship is good for economic growth. I am not a believer in that at all. The world is a diverse place. If you look at one incident and treat that as a correlation which is fundamental, you'll make big mistakes. And if you look back at the history of humankind, there are indeed examples of dictators who have led to high growth, but there are also tons of examples of dictators who have run the economy to the ground and exploited people totally. Point is, it's a very loose correlation. You can't jump to any conclusion with that. And indeed, 2 years later, India's growth plummeted to minus 5%. After that spike to over 9%, minus 5%. Almost a reminder that don't be foolish to believe that dictatorship is good. There are freaky examples in history, but it's much more complicated and you need to bring in analysis into this. Fortunately, we were lucky. 1977, after 2 years of dictatorial control, the emergency, Indira Gandhi called an election. The initial surveys give the impression that she's going to win, but people were scared. That always happens during dictatorship. So they were saying that, yes, we will support our great leader. Fortunately, India has secret ballot. When it took place, Indira Gandhi lost the election. She stepped out. I can give you a footnote over here, personal one. Again, who can be sure of history and who can be sure of motivation? It always fascinated me. Why did Indira Gandhi call an election after taking authoritarian control, allow the election to be fair, and lose office and get out? We don't know. Some people say it was her arrogance. She believed that she was wildly popular. She called the election. She thought she will win. She was defeated. One person who was very close to Indira Gandhi was Pranab Mukherjee, the President of India. And I, when I was Chief Economic Advisor to the Indian government, I worked very closely with Pranab Da. This is one of my last conversations with Pranab Mukherjee. He was old, President of India. I was visiting. By then I had finished my work in India and gone back to America. I was visiting. I went to meet him. I asked, Pranab Babu, tell me, why, you knew Indira Gandhi very well, why did she call an election in 1977? Pranab Da told me this is he said Indira Gandhi came to Murshidabad for some electioneering work. Then Pranab Mukherjee met Indira Gandhi, and Indira Gandhi said that, you know, I'm going to lose. She had a very good political sense. My support base has gone. I'm going to lose the election. And Pranab Mukherjee said that Indira Gandhi was beginning to regret that she was ruining one of the great strengths of India, which gave India a global standing. India's democracy and secularism, which had made India powerful, with authoritarian control, she was damaging that democracy, which was her father's heritage. And by then she was regretting, wanted a fair election. Called it, she lost, and we were lucky that she lost. After that, policies began to change, and from 1980s, early 1980s, Indira Gandhi was assassinated in 1984, you know. From early 1980s, India's growth picks up from that 3.5%. There were 1 or 2 years spike like that 1975-76, but from 1982-83 growth picks up to about 5%. 4.5%, 5% it continues till early 1991 when there is a massive crisis. India's economy virtually crashes in 1991. What happened? That was the time when I became interested in India's economy. Till then, I was teaching at the Delhi School of Economics, and my interests were in economic theory, pure theory, not really watching an actual economy develop. But I started writing newspaper columns, and I was getting into taking an interest in what was happening in India. 1991, I won't go into the details, I still want to get to the current situation and talk a little bit about it. 1991, India's foreign exchange reserves crashed. We know roughly what the story was, that there was a crisis in the Middle East with the Gulf War, America intervening, massive situation developed, and India's workers, that time India's foreign exchange remittance used to come mainly from workers, not well-off Indians, not corporations running globally, but Indian workers, mainly in the Gulf area, remitting money. They stopped remitting money, India's foreign exchange reserves were vanishing, India was on the verge of a default. A new government had been established with Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh, and they put in a set of reforms. One reform uses a logic which actually I was writing about in the India Today, that we should think of that, and I was very supportive of the government's policy at that time. A lot of my friends with whom I have a natural sympathy were upset that I was supporting that policy of the government. Let me give you over here a little bit of pure logic, that backward induction thinking, how to draft good policy, you have to be able to do a little bit of backward induction thinking or two-period thinking. Let me slip back and give you a story from my childhood. When I was growing up in Kolkata, Uttar Kolkata, one of my relatives, a very naughty kid, climbed up to the terrace of our house in Uttar Kolkata, pipe বেয়ে ছাতে উঠে পড়লো, খুব ছোট্ট ছেলে, ছাতে উঠে গিয়ে নামতে পারছে না, বসে কান্নাকাটি আরম্ভ জুড়ে দিল। সব আত্মীয় স্বজনরা ঘিরে ধরে বলছে যে বাবা, ছেলেটা তো বাহাদুরি, কিরম পাইপ বেয়ে একবারে ছাতে উঠে গেল, ভীষণ সাহস। আমার বাবা, I think I must have inherited this two-period thinking from my father. আমার বাবা একটু চিন্তায় বললো, খুবই ভালো বাহাদুরি বুঝছি, কিন্তু পাইপ বেয়ে উঠে যাওয়ার আগে কিভাবে নামতে হবে না ভেবে যে ছেলেটা গড়গড় করে উঠে গেল, সেটা কিন্তু একটু চিন্তার ব্যাপার। তার ভবিষ্যতে কি হবে জানি না, যে নামবার কথা না ভেবে পাইপ বেয়ে উঠে গেল। দিস ইজ two-period thinking. India's foreign exchange, তার connection with foreign exchange কি, এটা বোঝাই। India's foreign exchange reserves used to be very low for a very long time. $5 billion. Becomes $6 billion, you feel good. Becomes $3 billion, you feel bad. $5 billion for a big country is negligible. India had very strict rules. You can't take your foreign exchange out of the country. আমারও মনে আছে যখন ছাত্রাবস্থায় প্রথমে বিদেশে যাচ্ছি, very strict rule, এত কটা ডলার পকেটে নিয়ে বেরোতে পারবে। And the rule was justified, saying that, you know, India has very little foreign exchange, you can't let people take foreign exchange out. But you need to do a little bit of thinking. If you don't allow Indians to take your foreign exchange out of the country, Indians will not bring their foreign exchange into the country. To encourage people to bring foreign exchange into the country, they need a little bit of comfort that it's my money, I brought it in. When the need arises, I'll be able to take it out. If you allow them to take it out, they will bring money in. This was roughly one of the reforms in 1991. 1991 was a time of very big reforms. When you first do this, প্রথমে যখন allow করছো যে you can take your foreign exchange out, there is a big danger. First time you are allowing people to take foreign exchange out, people will rush out with their money. That কে জানে ভবিষ্যতে কি হবে. So you need to some kind of a protection, and India went to the International Monetary Fund. International Monetary Fund said, change these rules, we will stand next to you. If your foreign exchange goes out, we will come in and provide foreign exchange. So the International Monetary Fund came in. India began changing the rules, saying you can take money in and out of the country. First few months, it was very dangerous. Foreign exchange reserves dropped to enough for 13 days of imports. That's eventually India would default, import korte parbe na, a real crisis. But then foreign exchange started building up. When Maharaj wrote to me and said, do I need a PowerPoint? Only place where I thought I would need a PowerPoint, but I'll tell you verbally just now, is if you look at India's foreign exchange reserves. Up to 1991-92, from you can go back to 1970, foreign exchange reserves remained at $5 billion over time, like a flat line over time. From 1992, 93, 94, it shoots up like this. Very seldom do you see a graph which for 20 years is like this, then goes up. Once you change these rules, make it easier to take money in and out, people begin to bring money in. And already Indians were doing business, they were all over the place, money begins to go up. One more problem that was there with India, which in 1991 begins to change, is India had very severe trade restrictions. You can't bring anything in, you can't take anything out. You know, in real life, you have to be practical. There are risks if you keep your borders open, but you also need to do that. One area where India was suffering, you know, one of the early investments that India made, which was, I think, marvelous, is in higher education. India's higher education, right from the time of independence, certainly by 1950, the IIT, Kharagpur coming up, other IITs, ISI, IIM, Indian universities, India's higher education is flourishing. But with the economy not growing, you had unemployed engineers. By 1991, lots of unemployed engineers. You needed the economy to be opened up. And 1991 was the big reform where you allow the economy to be opened up. Computers, Narayan Murthy, the founder of Infosys, once told me that those days, to import one computer, you have to come to Delhi 3 times to plead for a special permission to import a computer. You can't have an industry take off unless you allow import-export. All these reforms were done, dangerous 2-3 years. India's information technology sector takes off. From 1991, after the reforms of the 3 years, from 1994, India's growth rate goes to 6%, which had not been seen before. 1997, there is a 97, 98, 99, bit of a crisis because the East Asian economies are doing very badly. India by then is a fairly open economy, interacting with others, bit of a dip. Again, from about 2002-03, India's economy begins to pick up. 2002, one of the variables, and I'm giving you a long history in a very short account, one of the variables that you do need for an economy to take off is of the fraction of the national income, the share that is called savings. So if your income is 100 rupees and if you save 20 rupees, then your savings rate is 20%. So you take a nation's income and look the fraction that is saving, that's called the savings rate. There's an old theory in economics that for developing countries especially, the savings rate is important. Unless the savings rate is reasonably high, an economy can't really take off and do well. India's savings rate used to be very low for a very long time. It began to pick up. From about 1980s, a slow pickup. 2002, when Vajpayee is Prime Minister, India's savings rate picks up even more. And by 2004-05, India's savings rate is beginning to look like the East Asian Tigers' savings rate. Very high savings rate, and India's growth rate picks up again. India's growth rate goes to 8% or so. From 2003 to 2011, I treat that as the magic years. Growth rate is taking place at about 8%, 8.5%. Earlier, it used to be given as 9%. India does make corrections on its growth figures. Now it is as 8% in retrospect. It's 8% India's growing over this period. So India's beginning to do well, joining the world forces, and India's information technology sector has taken off. I will give you a little bit of my personal experience. I joined government, as was pointed out, in 2009. It was, for me, it was a very dramatic moment. I was department chair at Cornell University. So usually in summer I would come to Delhi, Kolkata, spend a bit of a vacation and go back. I was about to go back when I got this phone call from the Prime Minister's office, that time Manmohan Singh's office, and someone asked, will you join Manmohan Singh's government as the Chief Economic Advisor for India's policy making? I said, this is such a big question that I'm here for one more day. Next day I'm going back. I can't immediately give you an answer. I was excited, but I couldn't give an answer. Next day I've written about this. I met with Dr. Manmohan Singh, had a conversation, wonderful conversation. I made it very clear that I was not a party person. I cannot take a party line, but I'm a professional. And he said, that is exactly what I want. And I joined in the government. During this period, I want to give you a few examples of policy making because this I had hands-on, including little bits of theory and technical analysis. Some of the students may follow, this is almost a mathematical area, but I'll give it to you in words. There are lots of advice you give to a government. Many are not taken. Life is complicated. Many economists used to get angry that I go to government, gives advice is not taken. Government can't take everybody's advice. People are giving advice. But I had both failures and successes. I'll give you one or two examples of that, of policy changes. One which did cause controversy, but I think was a great success, is one field of economics where it's as precise as engineering, is auction theory. How do you sell a product? By creating an auction. And let me try to explain this to you. In the case of India, we were that time thinking of selling 3G spectrum. Some of you, especially the younger ones, will know exactly what it means. I have to confess, I don't know what it means, but I was the Chief Economic Advisor. We are selling 3G spectrum, will be sold. The plan was the way you sell anything government sells. You call in bureaucrats who will value it, and then you sell it off at that price. We called in, I was in Delhi in the North Block, we called in experts. They valued the 3G spectrum and said that this will be $7 billion. Lot of money, $7 billion, and there was pressure immediately that let us sell it to big Indian businesses for $7 billion. I went to see Dr. Manmohan Singh 2-3 times, even Pranab Mukherjee once. I said, Dr. Singh, instead of bureaucrats valuing it and selling, we should create an auction and sell the product by the use of an auction, because auction theory is very, very well developed. Let me give you a brief verbal introduction to auction. When you sell a product, let us say I'm going to sell this work of art. This is a work of art done by Picasso. I want to sell it. I own it. When you're going to sell a product like this, the problem is people who've come to the auction want to buy it for as low a price as possible. That's the right thing. You're going to buy it, you'll try to pay as little as possible. I'm selling it, I want to get as much as possible. People typically will not reveal their real value of this. And why? What's the reason? Let us suppose, for simplicity, let me keep it in dollars. This is, for you, the value of this is $100. Or think of this as 1000 taka. Eta value tomar. So you are willing to pay up to $100 for this, you value it that much. On a piece of paper, you will have to write down how much you will pay. Everyone will write down, and then I will open it up and give it to the highest bidder. Will you write down the maximum you are willing to pay? The answer is no. You will look around the room and say, how much will others pay for this? And no one is going to pay $100 for this. The maximum they'll go to is $50. That being so, I will write down $51. Most people reason like that, they will write a lower price. So if you do a standard auction where you write down values and close it, you will get it for less of a price. People will write a smaller price. Take another auction. There are lots of stories I've personally encountered, but I won't go into that. Take another kind of auction where you literally start bidding. $50 I'm starting. If you want to pay a higher price, you you shout out. Someone says 51, okay, 51, 51. Someone says 54, 54. And the person who values this at $100 says 55. No one bids anymore. That person gets it for $55. So the auctioneer never discovers what the true value is. William Vickrey, a mathematical economist, discovered something which is called the second price auction. And I'll leave it to you later for the students to think. A second price auction is the following. I'm auctioning this. On a piece of paper, you write down how much you're willing to pay for this. I'll collect all the pieces of paper, look at what you've written. I will give it to the person who wrote the highest price, but that person will pay the price of the second highest bidder. That's called the Vickrey auction or a second price auction. Everyone writes down a price, the highest bidder gets it, but pays the price of the second highest bidder. If you shut your eyes and think for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe half an hour, you will realize that if you are involved in bidding in a second price auction, it is in your self-interest to write down the maximum you're willing to pay. A Vickrey auction results in everyone revealing their maximum value. Auctions can be of many different types. I went to Dr. Singh arguing that we have to do this, not just have bureaucrats value and sell, we have to design it properly and do it, and India did that. And we do know now that what we would have sold for $7 billion, because that's what the bureaucrats valued it, was sold for $15 billion. That's a well-designed auction, and auction theory is really like building a bridge, engineering. There are mathematical models and analysis of that, and some of the Indians are absolute top-notch auction theorists in the world, but this was done by a London-based company that did it. There are other things. Another suggestion of mine which was not taken, I've written about this, again needs this two-period analysis. This became very controversial. One of the few times in government when I thought I'll have to resign and leave the government, I'll probably get thrown out. This was written about a lot. Corruption in India is a very big problem. How do you control corruption? Bribery, for instance. I reached a conclusion sitting in government office that India's Prevention of Corruption Act 1988 has a problem. The Prevention of Corruption Act says that if there is a case of bribery, one person gives a bribe to a bureaucrat, then both the bureaucrat who took the bribe and the person who gave the bribe will be punished. 5 years in jail, there are details of what kind of punishment for what kind of bribery. Both the giver and the taker will be punished. Now in Indian courts, this is very well recorded. Every time there is hint of a bribery, in the court, the giver and the taker will both invariably stand up and say, no, there was no bribery. And you can easily see the logic. The person who gave the bribe, when giving the bribe, you may hate the police or the bureaucrat who comes and asks for a bribe. Imagine asking for a bribe which is legitimate. I was talking about bribery for legitimate activity. I have taken a driving test, I drove well, then the person doing the test says, give me a bribe and I'll give you the license. Infuriating. But more than that, having a law which says that the giving and taking are both punishable will mean you'll never get evidence of bribery, because the person who gave the bribe may have hated the police who asked for a bribe, but in court will never stand up and say, yes, he took a bribe from me, because he will be arrested. So I made a case, and I made a big mistake. I was still new in government. I posted on the government's website an idea which said that bribery punishment should be made asymmetric. The police person who asks for a bribe and takes the bribe should be punished, and the person who gives the bribe should be exempted, should not be punished. This caused a furor. I remember one very strong article by Ashok Mitra from here, Calcutta, really attacking me, saying utterly immoral idea. It was a strategic idea that we want bribery to stop and you want this to go two-way, and I've written about this extensively. I won't take up your time. I got into trouble even with Dr. Manmohan Singh. Dr. Manmohan Singh said, I don't agree with you, Kousik, about this. But I have to say, again, I have a lot of respect for him. Having said that he does not agree with me, he also added that, but your job as an advisor is to bring ideas to the table, so you should feel free to do that. So it was a majestic kind of advice to give me. Bring ideas to the table, you should feel free to do that, but this one I will not take. I don't agree with you. I do still think he's wrong. This was a good idea. You have to craft it very well and bring it in, but this was an idea that did not get taken. By the way, around the world, there are examples of these kinds of asymmetric punishment, where then you begin to catch more people and the whole incidence of bribery goes down. Economics is full of these kinds of examples, problems, challenges that we face. I want to spend a little bit of time. Actually, let me give you one more example during my time of inflation control, and then I want to talk of some contemporary challenges. You know, when I was in government, one of the biggest problems was inflation. Prices were going up, especially of food, very rapidly. I should tell you again one thing. When inflation takes place, very often it's a standard language. If you're against the government, you say the government is causing it. If you're a supporter of the government, you say government is not causing it. But I will tell you the truth. Inflation is so complicated, neither side knows quite what's happening. And inflation management is very, very difficult. It goes, at times when it goes out of control. Yes, if you're an outsider, you blame everything on the government. If you're an insider, you blame everything on others. The truth is, no one fully understands. So unlike auction, which we understand properly, there are mathematical structures. Inflation is partly data, partly guesswork, how you manage, and of course there are big data systems, etc. During my time, one of the big inflation was food inflation. How do you dampen it? Here again, there was a technical economic theory idea I brought to the table. This one was accepted. This was soon after I joined government. Dr. Manmohan Singh called a meeting with ministers and other people. It's a small group, senior bureaucrats, about how do we control the food price inflation. So Dr. Singh actually asked others to listen to me and asked me if I could give some ideas about food price inflation control. I said that, it is complicated. We don't quite know. We have rough ideas, but not fully as to where it's coming from. But there's one very specific thing that can be done to bring it down a little. What India used to do then, and it has continued, is when there is high food price inflation, the government usually releases food onto the market. If the supply goes down, prices will go down. So government has stocks of wheat and rice. So you offload the wheat and the rice onto the market, and that will dampen the price. The way that used to be done was the following, literally like this. 1,000 metric ton blocks were auctioned off to private traders in the market. So you come to Kolkata, Food Corporation of India will come, FCI, 1,000 metric tons, traders will bid, you say, okay, you've got the highest bid, you would take the 1,000 metric tons. Another 1,000 to another trader. So say 5,000 metric tons to 5 traders. They are told you can sell at whatever price you want. They will of course want to make money, so they'll begin to sell that, and that will bring down prices. But having 5 traders, selling 1,000 metric ton, big amounts, does not dampen price as much as having 50 traders, all with small amounts. They will not be able to collude. Or 500 traders, they will be offloading more onto the market, prices will go down more. This is economic theory that goes back to 1838, the work of Augustin Cournot, that smaller traders, large numbers, will not be able to collude and hold prices high up, few will. I remember feeling very awkward in this meeting with the Prime Minister and others, that there is an idea you can bring in. Instead of having 5 big traders, 1,000 metric ton each, bring in 50 traders, give them, instead of 1,000 metric tons each, 100 metric tons each, and tell them go out and sell, prices will come down much more. I was absolutely delighted that it caught the Prime Minister's ear, and at the end of the meeting, we had a lot of discussion. He said, actually, this has to be implemented. We want smaller blocks to larger number of traders so that prices go down. Again, life is complicated. Prices did go down, but one doesn't take credit because we know that many things matter, money supply matters, this, that, but this was a concrete policy which was accepted. There were other policies which were not accepted. Let me come to present times and what are the challenges. India is going through a difficult phase or an easy phase, depends on your viewpoint. Overall growth, right now, 8.2% last year, GDP growth, is India's at last getting back to the growth where India was from 2003 to 2011. India was at about 8% growth. After that, it's been going down, fluctuating up and down. From 2016, India's growth has done very poorly. During the COVID crisis, growth fell everywhere in the world, but India's growth fell more than most countries. India's plummeted absolutely. After that, it's been picking up, and last 2 years, India's growth is actually pretty decent. 8.2% is decent growth over the last year. The problem, however, is that this growth is not getting distributed well enough. Inequality has always been a problem in India. Few people are extraordinarily rich and the masses are not, but this is getting much worse. Most of the data is showing inequality in few hands is shooting up, so the growth is not spreading. So by focusing just on the aggregate GDP, we are missing out on the fact that it is not being distributed well. And I take the view, you know, in economics, this comes from David Hume, the view that prescriptive views, normative views, you can take independently of your analytical views. I am a believer that the world should have much greater equality than we have today. You can't immediately jump and say that bring in taxes and correct it because it will backfire. And we've seen that happen. It has to be designed intelligently, but you need greater equality. And this I felt for a very long time. Economists, mainstream economists, well, many of them will say, you know, you earn more if you work harder, so why should government take away? To that, my response is, most of the inequality in life is at birth. Some people are born shockingly poor, some people are born shockingly rich, and they were not working hard to be born poor or born rich. It is a distinction at birth, and we have a responsibility collectively to equalize some of that. I am in favor of a certain amount of wealth tax. I am in favor of a certain amount of inheritance tax to correct this, and most countries, even capitalist countries, have systems of this kind of tax transfer, so I would want to bring that in. India inequality is rising very high and unemployment is increasing. The unemployment problem, I should tell you, it's not a blame to be placed on anyone because it's a very complicated, again, problem. It's a bit like inflation. It's not like auction. You can't say tomorrow I will solve the problem by doing this. But number one is you need data. India's gone weak on data. We need better data. And India was a global pioneer. Data means that occasionally data will come which will not be flattering. But we need to look at that and then put in corrective policies. My own hunch about unemployment is, I'm going to leave it with a broad idea because I'm not completely sure, is India's services sector is doing very well. Agricultural sector is low productivity, lot of workers, but the sector that picks up a lot of work and increases the demand, India has not done well, and not just today, but over the last 30 years, India has not done well. Manufacturing sector. Complicated problem, some of our laws need to be changed, many things have to happen. But if we begin to admit that youth unemployment is shockingly high, and we need to make corrections, then we will have looked through this and put in systems of change so that India's manufacturing sector takes up. This is a bit of a global problem, so it's not all at our doorstep. All over the world, the demand for ordinary labor is beginning to shrink. But in emerging economies like India, middle-income economies like India, our wages are still low. Another 5 years, 10 years, if we do our policies right, the problem that is being faced by Europe, by Japan, Korea, lack of demand for labor, it does not have to happen in India. Vietnam is doing very well. The booming economy with a lot of youth unemployment, we should be able to do well on that. This has to be kept up, that the manufacturing sector has to grow. You want to give it a boost through a set of policies. Inequality, in my mind, is you have to do it intelligently, and let me once pause and tell you one kind of mistake in inequality correction. There are my friends extremely radical friends will come and say we should flatten out the inequality totally. The reason you can't do that is if you begin to do that, flatten out inequality totally, is all capital is going to exit from your country. Because they will go to other countries where you don't pay such heavy taxes. This is realism. Even if you want complete flattening of inequality, you can't do it because the country will become impoverished, and a whole lot of countries have made that mistake and done very, very badly. Another mistake that happened was Russia is a classic example, that you nationalize everything, so all profit goes into the pocket of the government and not into the pockets of big businesses. Whole lot of profit going into the pockets of few big businesses is disconcerting, but you can't nationalize everything. If you nationalize and have just government owning it all, the problem is once you've pooled all the assets in one place, what in Hindi you would say nazar lag jata. People will then begin to eye that everything amassed together and try to capture it. In Russia, we know that is what happened. The early days after the Russian Revolution, 1917, there was a lot of effort, and some of this was genuine, that there's so much inequality, the Tsar's inequality, we want to put an end to it, centralize it all, hold it together. But once you get it all together, few businesses will try to capture the government. So cronyism happens, you capture the government, and through that you capture the asset which has been amassed together by the government. So to me, Russia is a great example that began as a communist country, ended up as a crony capitalist country of the worst kind, where the government and few businesses captured that. So you can't do that either. My point is taxes can be higher at the top end. It's a progressive tax. At the top end, it can be much higher. India, even in 2019, we gave tax concessions to the corporate sector of a kind that cannot be justified. But within limits, you can't do it beyond a point, but there is need now to intervene in that. One more sector, I'll talk a little bit about it and I will stop. Education. In today's world, with the changes in the method of production, demand for traditional work going down, the human mind, the creative mind, is the mind that will not be replaced immediately by machines and computers. Standard work is gradually going to go. I think India has still another 10 years of window where we can occupy the space being vacated by rich countries, but that will eventually go. But the creative mind, hopefully, will remain relevant throughout. And for the heart of it, which is what you do here, education, minds being sparked with creativity is crucial, and we need to do that. Countries which are doing that, sparking the mind, are the countries that are doing well on this. To back up a little bit on India's history, India, as I said, historically, after independence, did very well in the development of the creative mind. And when I used to be a professor at the Delhi School of Economics, I used to say that going to international conferences, it would invariably be Americans and Europeans, but the only country from where you did not feel out of place at all was India. Because in higher education, India had a global standing. So we would go there, feel completely at home in these meetings. We've done very well. We have to preserve that. Some of this is eroding. We have to keep this up. Basic education, literacy, India did not do well historically. This was a big lapse right from the time of independence. We were talking of literacy. The top end was getting very good education, but basic literacy was not good. But from 1991, 92, literacy is catching up, but we do need school level education at the topmost quality. I'll give you one historical example and stop with that. If you go back to the early 1990s, 1920, 1925, I've written about this. It was being predicted that Argentina is going to come out as the world's richest economy. Argentina was that time the world's 10th richest economy in terms of per capita income. It had grown very well for about 30 years or so. And then it was predicted it will overtake the remaining countries and go to the forefront. But we know from about 1930, 35, I've talked about this in meetings with Ramakrishna Mission, United States took off. started growing at a phenomenal pace, and Argentina started floundering. What happened? Many reasons. One is Argentina became a hyper-nationalist country, putting barriers, foreigners will not be allowed. It became a closed door, tariff rates were shooting up. I don't think it's good ever. And again, this is almost a moral lesson, as was the beautiful quotation in the beginning reminding me that it's human beings that we are concerned about. A person suffering anywhere, no matter what that person's race, religion, nationality, a suffering human being is a suffering human being. We must reach out. No country manages to get to that, but you at least aspire to that broad-mindedness about human concern. Argentina was becoming extremely narrow-minded. But there was another more concrete thing which people have written about. Soft power, the power of education. United States suddenly started investing in it in a big way. People talk about United States' military power, but just with that, United States would have been North Korea. United States, much more important for me than the military power, was the respect for knowledge and education and science that started after World War I, became huge. And the flourishing of this knowledge sector gave America a dominance of the global economy of a kind where Argentina began to flounder. I feel India is a country that has the capacity for that. And India ought to emphasize the quality of education, creative education, nurturing of the best minds, because that is where the future lies. And that was not a topic today, but I also want to tell you that, having certain ethical standards of behavior, moral standards in economics, we don't spend enough time on it. But we know this from laboratory experiments to real life, that a basic ethical grounding is crucial for a society to do well. It sounds contradictory. Another day, if you make the mistake of inviting me, I'll come and talk specifically on the relationship on ethical standards, moral standards, and the economy. That is also important. India is at a critical juncture. With a little bit of nurture, right policies, concern, which is an open-minded concern of inclusiveness, which the Ramakrishna mission really epitomizes, I think the prospects are huge. Let me stop with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. That was a really engaging lecture. Held us captive for over an hour now. So, before we go to the formal vote of thanks, I think Professor Basu would like to take some of the questions. If some of our students or faculties have any question relevant to what he said or on economics in general, please raise your hands. Yes, please. Kamalakanto. ওই যে বাঁদিকে
Hello. I'm actually faculty of physics. My name is Somit Ray. My question is rather simple. We have seen during Manmohan Singh government's regime that there was farm law or farm bill, which was then the government was forced to rebuild. And during again this new BJP government, again we see that the farm bill was forced to actually been rebuilt. So what is this actually? I just want to know what do you feel about this bill, or if you enlighten us in some way that what is the necessity of this bill, that both kind of government are trying to push it through, but they are not making it.
The farm bill, I do believe that the farm laws and likewise labor laws do need reform. But these are very complicated matters. I can't get into the full details. I was negative about the nature of the way the farm bills were being reformed, which finally, luckily got repealed. And let me explain this to you a little bit. In India, the price difference, barring the control price which is being released, farm price and the price that you're paying is a huge gap. So you do need rules, regulations, new laws to change that. One of the things that troubled me about the last time when the law was being repealed and the new laws were brought in, there was also a simultaneous change taking place of another law, which is stocking of food grains. India has a law which puts restrictions on how much food grain you can stock. So alongside the Farm Bill, a law was being changed that you can allow large amounts of stocking of food bills. My worry was, and I wrote this piece with an absolutely brilliant friend of mine, Nirvikar Singh, at the University of Santa Cruz. We wrote on this, that if you allow this kind of free stocking, what is going to happen is a few big businesses will come in and replace the government's functioning of the link between farmers and consumers. Given that there are hundreds and thousands of farmers, if two big businesses become the middle person who are buying from them, stocking up massive amounts and selling to consumers, the gap between what the consumers are paying and what the farmers are getting will grow. So you will have to have in place, America, every time it goes for a pro-market law, uses antitrust legislation to make sure that it will not be just one person who will be the middleman or two persons, because then the gap will be huge. You need to have a separate law to make sure that it's multiple middle traders who are competing with one another. That was not there, so I think we were very, very lucky that that version of the law did not go through. What should go through is such a long topic that I will not go to just now, but that law needs reform. Likewise, I think labor laws do need reform.
Yes, anybody else? Yeah. So many hands, but maybe we are afraid that we will not be able to take all your questions, but okay, let us see how many we can take.
Good afternoon, sir. I actually have two questions. The first one is deals with the Indian economy, and the second one is a bit personal one. The first question is that we have seen inflation trends, as you said that it fluctuates, but I don't exactly remember the year, but in 1975, I suppose it shot up to 25 or 8% something. So what were some probable causes for it? And my second question, which is a bit personal one, is that we all know that in 2008, the world recession happened, and in 2009, you took over as the chief economic advisor. So what was the situation for you at that time? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, okay, good. Personal question, I'll come later. Let me take on the first one. Inflation, it's quite interesting. The inflation record India's is not 1975, it's 1973. And it's higher than what you said, it was about 30%. 30% inflation for India. India is generally, by global standards, a low inflation country. 30% was shockingly high. Many factors that time. You know, oil prices globally had shot up because OPEC was formed. 1973, they colluded, pushed up prices, so it went everywhere, but that was the record. What's happening now, just the inflation difference is much less than that, but with one difference, which is hitting people very differently. Overall inflation is, the exact figure right now is I think 5.1 or 5.2% is overall inflation. It's high, but not that high by global standards, and there are global reasons for it. But vegetable inflation is close to 30%. 29 point some percent. Now, when we talk of overall inflation, what we do is we take different items, the inflation on them, give weights and aggregate it. But you have to realize that the weights, though we use one set of weights for all India, depending on your income level, the weights will be very different. For someone who is super rich, the amount spent on vegetables will be a fraction of your monthly income. You're spending your income on cars, houses, hotels, a tiny fraction on vegetables. If vegetable inflation takes place 30%, your overall inflation hitting you is still very low. For a poor person, vegetable and food could easily be half your monthly spending is on that. So when the inflation is high on that, your overall inflation hitting you is high. So though the overall inflation now is lower, again the inequality hit is very big because of the proportionality over there. And your question about, that's a very interesting question because actually it touches a chord in me. I'm glad you asked. You know, I was a professor till 2009 at Cornell, and I'm back there again. When the global crisis started, my wife is here and she can tell you that this is true. I used to say I don't understand this crisis because it was happening in the financial sector. And I don't play the financial market. I was not being hit at all. My income was the same, food prices were the same. I would open the newspaper and see that a crisis is happening. But The Economist magazine gave a very nice analogy. saying that initially the crisis is a bit like a plumbing crisis. When a plumbing problem starts at home, in the beginning, ordinary users of water won't even realize because it's getting clogged. So only experts know that the clogging has started, but the water is flowing. So ordinary people will say, no, water is flowing, what's my plumbing problem? But clogging has started, and it had started. I've written a lot on that crisis, but I won't get into that. When 2009 I came and joined, really in the first months I realized my hands are just overwhelmed because the crisis was beginning to come into India. And it was very, very simple things which happened. You know, when you do international trade, you need a small amount of money to put down when you're striking a contract with someone. That look, I will buy, I'm first putting down an initial amount of money. When you are putting that initial amount of money, you may need to borrow money. So if credit begins to dry up, you can't do that, so trade begins to be hit. So by the time I joined Indian government 2009, end of 2009, the global crisis was hitting all over the world and hitting India. And I used to really regret that sitting in Cornell, I used to laugh and joke that what kind of a crisis is this that it's not affecting me? Because my first 2 years in India, my hands were absolutely full with handling that global crisis which had come to our shore. Thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, I have a question in the present context that India is projecting to a $5 trillion or $10 trillion economy by 2047. What do you think, or what is your take on the individual actions and the government actions we should take to reach that target?
Yeah. You know, this target, frankly, I have to say, disappoints me. I don't feel excited about that. One thing is, India's GDP has been growing steadily. One thing that GDP is population growth is a part of GDP if your population is growing. So India's GDP as a whole has been growing for a long time, and gradually we are overtaking another small country and another small country. Population is growing and also per capita income is growing. And the $5 trillion target or $10 trillion target has one thing. It's a target in dollars. So one way of meeting that target is if the exchange rate changes, with nothing changing on the ground, you'll become that. So it's not really the target to go for. And much more importantly than that, by focusing attention on that whole sum, we are ignoring the distribution of that income, where there is a lot of evidence now. From across the board, inequality can be measured in many different ways, especially if you take the inequality of a few rich and the masses. It is going back to colonial times, that level of inequality. So yes, GDP growth is important, but it is important because you want that growth to spread welfare across society. I don't for a moment grudge that we should try our GDP to grow, but I think we should give out data fairly about what's happening to ordinary people and use some corrections. And to say that the inequality is God-given, that is a misuse of the term God-given, because these inequality is created by, part of it is the rules and the laws of the nation creates that. So many of this part can be corrected, and we should give much more attention to the distribution of the GDP rather than the total.
Okay, Madhike, pechone Madhike jao. And it would be nice if you can tell your name and your department, please. Okay, sure. Someone from the school, please raise your hand.
Hello.
Who is it?
Yeah. Good afternoon, sir. I am from physics first year. So my question is, as you said in your speech, that one of your policies that didn't get accepted was that bribery thing. So I wanted to know the opposite side of the argument, because what you said, I found it very logical that it should be. So what were the opposite? They were saying what?
Yeah. Oh, very good. I'm so glad you asked. So I can tell you, in fact, I skipped over that bit. After I wrote about this with this, I still think it's logically a good idea. You have to be a bit careful when you implement these, but I think it's a good idea. And there are tests which have been done now in laboratories by Lata Gangadharan, one-time student of mine here, and Klaus Abink and Uttyo Dasgupta and another author, 4 of them. and it's a paper published in a top journal. They, in laboratory, they created this environment. They did it in Hyderabad, I think, and published a paper with a large sample. The argument that I was giving does go through. With a few caveats, it goes through. If you make these punishments one-sided, you begin to see a difference. And I'll give you one more example where this kind of an intelligent design of the law is important. Shotidaho Protha, the dreadful custom of Shotidaho Protha. For a long time, the British had a law saying that Shotidaho is not just wrong, but witnessing, because people would stand and cheer the Shotidaho, witnessing of Shotidaho is also a crime. It was later realized that maybe it's a crime, but if you make witnessing a crime, when Shotidaho takes place, you will not find witnesses. No one will come up in the court and say that, look, I saw it. So for strategic reasons, you need to change that law and say that Shotidaho witnessing is not a crime, and that was indeed done. So I feel there's enough evidence that are lab experiments. The counter argument is with my conversation with Dr. Manmohan Singh when I have so much respect for him because he's a rare person of ethics in politics. So it becomes difficult to do politics if you have ethics, but he on the phone, I called him up because there were newspaper articles attacking the government because I had put up this idea. He said, I disagree with you, Kousik, that both sides are wrong. I tried to explain on the phone that maybe both sides are wrong, but if we hold one side punishable, then the other side will provide evidence and in the long run we can cure it. I think that is the right argument. There was one person, and I'm grateful to that, who wrote a supportive piece on my argument, was Narendrapur, said that actually this is the kind of thing we should think about. And China, in 1999, brought in some laws which were asymmetric laws, punish one side but not the other. I think the main reason people objected it sounds awful. That giving a bribe is not punishable just sounds so bad that even if I suddenly heard that, I would say that it's wrong. But the reality is there are tricky situations in economic life where you have to put on your hard-headed thinking and say it may sound wrong, but still it is a good idea. So I'm glad that you and I are at least on the same side.
Thank you, sir.
So, okay, someone from the school, please. Anybody? Yes. Shamini Ashur. Tola. And may I have your name, please?
My name is Aftab Urkai. I'm a student of class 12.
Yeah, please, sure.
So, earlier in your speech, you mentioned about the income inequality prevailing in India. So, I wanted to ask what's your view on the caste resolution system as a method to eliminate this income inequality?
It's a very difficult question. You know, on balance, I do believe that a certain amount of reservation is needed as a corrective measure for years of wrong. And again, I don't play the game of blaming people in the past. Life was what it was. People lived by the norms of the time. We also nowadays may be doing many things which 100 years later people will look back on us and say that how wrong that was. But we do want to correct it. Reservations, you have to be careful. I'm in favor of small reservation, not that you look at the percentage of population and use the same percentage. That leads to a quality hurt in a big way. But a certain amount is called for. And even in the United States, it's not done through formal affirmative action. But I do know when I was at the World Bank and even now when I sit in on different committees, the pressure is very high. It's not a formal rule, but immediately instructions will come. Please just take a look at blacks who are getting these jobs because too few are getting jobs, you want to pull them in. And these are not easy problems because if you have not educated one segment of the population in the past properly, suddenly to pull them into the workplace, you will do a little bit of damage. So there is a balancing act involved, but I do believe it is a wrong that we want to right, and ultimately, and I keep saying, this is my own view, that fortunately, you know, this view came out from thinkers. A lot of thinkers from West Bengal played a big role in this. Human beings go back 80,000 years, we all come from Africa. Our roots are the same, our genetic makeup is the same. Yes, we have gone different ways, different religions, different nationalities, but our commonness is so much deeper that we want to strive towards that. So affirmative action is a bit of a step to correct for these. You have to do that intelligently, carefully. If I was sitting on a commission, I would take a lot of time how you design, but a certain amount of that I'm in favor of.
Okay, maybe one or two more questions. Okay.
Hello sir, I'm Priyanshu Kormakar, Economics third year. স্যার আমরা জানি যে ইনইকুয়ালিটি ইন্ডিয়ার জন্য একটা খুবই গুরুত্বপূর্ণ সমস্যা। তো এই সমস্যাটাকে ইন্ডিয়ান গভর্নমেন্ট কিভাবে ডিল করতে পারে? আর দ্বিতীয় প্রশ্ন হচ্ছে, ট্যাক্সেস এখন বর্তমান ইন্ডিয়াতে খুবই হাই, ফরেন এক্সচেঞ্জ ট্যাক্স, ট্রেড ট্যাক্সেস। তো এই ট্যাক্সেস কি আদৌ ইন্ডিয়ার জন্য সত্যি উপকার করছে নাকি অন্য?
শোনো, ট্যাক্সে আমি ইংরেজি বাংলা বিষয়ে বলছি ফর এভরিওয়ান। দ্য taxes very high depends on what. Tax on wealth is zero. Tax on inheritance is zero. Also, progressive income tax, where you're not taxing the whole income of the person. Once you become a billionaire, as you're earning more, you're paying a very heavy tax on that, which is not that you're taking away what you earned in the process of getting to that. That I'm in favor of. Taxation should be progressive taxation. So certain kinds of taxes should be raised. But if you're talking of taxes in products, which ordinary people are buying, I would keep that low and use taxation on super high income. And you know, there are countries which are capitalist market economies, the Scandinavian countries. If you look at their tax GDP ratio, way higher than India. Their markets function, there is free market and functioning, but the rich pay a heavy amount of tax. I'm a believer in that. But again, I want to underline, because I used to have arguments with people who go for extreme measures of this and would do it blindly. If you do it blindly, you can crash the economy. So you have to do it taking into account. In my last book that I've written, I have discussed at great length what I call an accordion tax, which is a method of taxation where you do not damage individual incentives, but increase equality much greater. And once again, I'm not a dreamer to think that you can have perfect equality. That's not possible. But the level of inequality cannot be beyond a certain level, and it is for us, and you don't go out there and disrupt markets for that. But for ordinary people to feel that this we need to do it intelligently, I think is imperative. And right from certain East Asian countries to Nordic countries, Scandinavian countries, they've done much better than what we've done. Historically also, India was always, inequality was bad, but never like Pakistan, where we used to be told 22 families controlled everything. Never like that. Never like in Latin American countries. So a very high inequality, even then it needed correction, but it is getting worse and we do need correction.
Okay, the last question maybe.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Srijan Chaudhary from the Department of Economics. Sir, you've just mentioned about wealth tax in your address. Sir, with this huge shadow of capitalism in the Indian economy, do you think that wealth tax would push away the capitalists and the top wealthy people from India? As we have seen, many of the billionaires have already exited the country. Thank you.
That is the risk I was telling you about, that if you bring the wealth tax in too heavy, they are going to exit. But the main reason the exit is taking place, I feel if you bring in a reasonable amount of wealth tax, which is there virtually in all countries, exit will be minimal. Still, we are aware that there are island nations where there is zero tax, so some of it will get parked over there. So the main problem on this is a bit of a global problem. Now that you bring it up, I have also argued in many places, you need United States to take a lead, and there has to be a global contract so that you can't play one country against another. But that's not the world we live in. United States does not take a lead in this, unfortunately. So we have a global problem. You have to be sensitive to that. But I'll give you one more example where this problem arises. Labor rights. If you increase your labor rights too much, which we know historically was happening, big corporations would then go to China, where in China, prison labor had no rights. You can force them to do anything. But we don't want to, because of that, say laborers in our country will have no rights. You do a balancing act. You work through ILO and say put pressure on China that China should not take away the capital, but you do have a certain amount. So on wealth tax also, my suggestions are you have to be realistic. Can't go very heavy, you'll cause exactly the problem you're talking about, but a certain amount of it with other kinds of easing up of taxations, controls, etc. will not, in my opinion, cause a flight of capital.
So if you allow kindly just one more question from one of our faculties. The last question. I'm sorry.
Good
So
afternoon,
many other
sir.
interested
I am
people.
Dr. Firoz Ali from Department of Computer Science of this college. Sir, my question is that how do you see the unorganized sector after November 2016? And is there any problem due to GST in unorganized sector, which is the major contributing sector in our economy?
You know, this is a very good question. I don't have enough answer. It's casual conversations. I know in India, the unorganized sector is very large. And a lot of people who will point out that they are working notionally in the unorganized sector. And you can see this very clearly from agriculture. In India, the fraction of the population working in agriculture is very high. It's 45, I don't know the exact figure, 45% or so. The GDP that comes out of agriculture is about 13 or 14%. So 13 or 14% is being produced, absorbing 40-45% of workers, which immediately just tells you that these workers are just parking themselves in agriculture because they don't have any other option. And what was recently pointed out, this is actually, I'm quoting my friend Pranab Sen, who was the chief statistician of India, and I happened to be with him just last week, that right now, employment data is showing employment has gone up last year. I mean, you should feel good about it, 6% rise. But if you begin to scrape below the data, what you will find is that employment is, part of it is jobs, part of it is if you go on the roadside and sit with the thole trying to sell a few things, you are employed. Data is showing that that component is increasing in agriculture and informal sector. So the informal work is going up, whereas formal work is not keeping step with that. That brings me back to what I was saying. You have to have the manufacturing sector grow. This opportunity will not be there endlessly because robots and machines will come in. But Vietnam is doing it. There are many other countries, not too many countries, which through good policies are managing to bring workers in. And India, the manufacturing sector, which is just too small for a big, it's also 18% or so is manufacturing. That can be much larger, needs a lot of policy intervention, for which the first step is you have to admit, look at the data and say, yes, we are doing badly on this. There is no embarrassment in saying we are doing badly on two things, we are doing well on another thing. But now we need policies to expand that sector. So it's a very crucial thing, and that's my short answer to that.
So let us join our hands together once again to thank Dr. Kousik Basu, and this is the time for the proposal of formal vote of thanks, for which I would like to invite on stage Mr. Vijayaditya Chakraborty of Department of Economics of the college.
Namaskar. It's my profound honor to extend a heartfelt vote of thanks on behalf of Ramakrishna Mission Residential College, Narendrapur, to our chief guest first, the distinguished Professor Kousik Basu, for his captivating lecture on the history of Indian economy in 1947 to 2024. For anyone seeking to attain a philosophical understanding of the intricate process of evolution of the Indian economy to its present state, this session was both an enlightening and enthralling experience. I am still under the spell, and I hope everyone is feeling the same over here. Sir, your summarization of the nation's economic journey through 8 long decades has been nothing short of magical. What we heard is a mosaic of intricate economic narratives woven with utmost clarity and charm and innovative stylization. You have described the shifts in paradigms in economic thoughts and touched upon the main characters that helped in the continued transformation of the economy. We had a lot of personal anecdotes, stories about dilemmas within the state's think tank, political cross-currents, stories of game theory and auction theory, newer stances to corruptions and whatnot. We are grateful for the rare privilege of experiencing your spellbinding ability to transform what is often perceived as a dry subject into a fascinating journey through India's economic history. Your engaging storytelling, steeped in global perspective, yet glowing with social and cultural sensibilities towards grounded Indian realities, has walked us through the nuanced intricacies of Indian economy. This has offered us a fresh outlook on the economic milestones and challenges that have shaped our nation. We are deeply appreciative of this intellectual feast you have provided us today. We will cherish it. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to revered Swami Shastrokanandaji Maharaj, Secretary, Ramakrishna Mission Ashrama, Narendrapur, and Swami Ekachittanandaji, Principal of this college, and all the monastic members present here. I also thank all the distinguished guests today, and the guardians and others who have come here, the faculty members from different disciplines, our non-teaching staffs, and our dear students who are, of course, the prime target for today's program. Thank you all for your presence and engagement. Your participation has made this program a success. Special thanks to the diligent staff members, Sombhu and Kamalakanto, responsible for lighting and acoustics. My sincere appreciation also goes to the internal quality assurance cell of our college for their tireless dedication and impeccable arrangements. Your hard work behind the scenes had made this enlightening session a grand success. Once again, thank you, Professor Basu, for gracing us with your presence and sharing your invaluable insights with us. Your lecture has left an indelible mark on our minds, and we look forward to the continued inspiration that your work and words provide. Thank you all for being here and for your attentive participation. May you all have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.
So with that, we conclude the session today. ছাত্রদের অনুরোধ করব তোমরা পেছনের দরজা দিয়ে সারিবদ্ধভাবে